So I'd just like to introduce myself at the outset. So my name is James Maher, and I'm head of division in direct payments in Portlaoise. And one of my responsibilities is the KT program. And I'm here tonight with my colleague Antoinette Conroy. So the purpose of this talk tonight is to give a high-level overview, really, of the scheme. The detailed terms and conditions are available on the website, and I will post a link in the chat so everyone has that and can examine them in detail. But just the purpose tonight really is to give a sense of the structure of the program and the key features of the program. So the knowledge transfer program is a 3-year cycle, and it will involve a discussion group model where the facilitator meets with participants in a meeting structure. In terms of the composition then of the group, the terms and conditions have a minimum of 10 participants per knowledge transfer group and a maximum of 20. And the group composition then can be configured geographically in accordance with local needs. Next slide, please, James. So as I said, it's a meeting-based program, and it will involve 8 group meetings each year of the 3-year scheme. 4 of these meetings will be on the topics from a list of mandatory priority topics. And those topics are set out in detail in an annex in the terms and conditions, and they align very closely with what James had presented earlier in terms of the Common Agricultural Policy objectives. One of those 4 meetings then will have to be delivered by an external expert. And I've just listed some of the occupations here where that expert might be drawn from, whether it be a vet, forester, or solicitor, for example. And in addition then to the 4 topics from the mandatory priority topics, there are 4 other meetings will focus on a local need or on local needs, which have been selected by the group. And as James mentioned earlier, the purpose of tonight's talk is to help select those local needs. And I'd just like to also mention that there's now a guide on the website to help when you're submitting group applications and selecting local needs. And I'll share that in the chat just after the talk. So in addition to the 8 group meetings each year, there'll also be a one-to-one meeting each year between the facilitator and each of the participants. In the first year, the purpose of that meeting will be to set the goals for the program, and that will have to be completed by the end of Q1 in 2024. In the second year of the program, the one-to-one meeting will assess progress to date and review goals, and that will have to be completed by Q2 in 2025. And finally, then in the third year of the KT program, the one-to-one meeting between facilitators and participants will have a look back and evaluate the scheme, and that will have to be completed by the end of the scheme year, December 2026. Next slide, please. So just a recap, I suppose, on the timelines. And the first one has already passed. The expressions of interest are now closed on the 1st of September. For anyone who was on the FOSS approved list of advisors on the 12th of July. So we're currently here in the second bullet here, where facilitators can now submit their groups, and that will be open on the online system until the 31st of October, which I appreciate is quite tight given everything else that's going on at the moment. So like I said, there's a guide now online to help with that application process. After 31st of October then, groups will be selected, and there'll be a mandatory e-module to be completed online on the CPD platform for KT facilitation skills. And that will have to be completed by the end of 2023, with the meetings then commencing following completion of that module in early 2024. Next slide, please. In terms of how we're going to go about selecting the groups, so the groups that have been registered by the knowledge transfer facilitators on our online KT system will be ranked and selected according to the following criteria. So the first criteria, which attracts a maximum of 40 points, will focus on the local need of the group and whether that has been clearly defined. So like I said earlier, that's set out in Annex 2 of the terms and conditions, and we'll spend more time in the later presentations and in the Q&A looking at the local need. The second criteria is the group involvement or proposed engagement with the EIP operational groups, with the Acres Cooperative Project and our demonstration farms, and that attracts 20 points in terms of the scoring. Third criteria is involvement of the external expert for 2024 and whether that has been specified, and that will also have a max of 20 points. And finally then, whether the group of farmers that have been submitted includes at least 20% new entrant farmers, young farmers or female farmers, and again 20 points for that criteria. So for the local need, the groups must select a minimum of 1 local need and up to a maximum of 4. And the KT group will receive points for the highest ranked local need under that particular criterion. In order then to qualify and to be approved, there's a minimum score across those 4 criteria, has to total up to more than 40 points. And we hope to have that evaluation done in November and contact the facilitators as soon as possible, informing them of any groups that have been approved or not approved through this process. Next slide, please. So the facilitation skills then, the training that I mentioned on the earlier slide on timelines, there will be an e-module available to everyone who's approved for the knowledge transfer scheme and who have their group applications approved on the same platform. And that will be located on the same location as where the other CPD modules are required for to be kept on the FOSS list. And that e-module has to be completed by the end of the year then, in advance of any group meetings starting next year. Next slide, please. In terms of participation in the knowledge transfer scheme, additional group entrants weren't permitted in the previous scheme as soon as the programme had commenced. And that's our intention again for the current scheme. Unless there have been exceptional circumstances or a force majeure situation where we will allow for the updated participants, for example, to comply with farm progression and the formation of partnerships. Nominees of participants will not be permitted under the scheme. Next slide, please. Similarly, with group transfers, in the previous scheme, there had been issues with group transfers where there have been changes of facilitators of the groups and moving between different groups. And again, in the current scheme, ad hoc group transfers will not be permitted except for in exceptional circumstances or force majeure situations, and they would be considered on a case-by-case basis depending on their individual circumstances. Next slide. So again, just to recap, the meetings will be a minimum of 8 meetings per year per knowledge transfer group, and the meetings have to be held within the calendar year, so by the end of December, in order to count towards that year. In order to host a meeting, the knowledge transfer facilitator will have to create an application to hold a group meeting using our online KT system, and that will confirm the location and time of the group meeting, just to facilitate any inspections that might have to take place, etc. And the timelines in terms of cancelling or changing meetings, they're all set out in detail in the terms and conditions document. Next slide, please. So again, all the group and one-to-one meetings will be facilitated by the facilitators using their online system to create the meetings, to record attendance, and to submit any claims. And again, just a quick recap then, in addition to those group meetings, the one-to-one meetings each year where we set goals in year 1, assess progress in year 2, and evaluate the scheme in year 3.